Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Lindsay Bruinsma, an MBA candidate at the McDonough School of Business, John J. DeGioia, president of Georgetown University, Brian T. Moynihan, CEO of Bank of America, and Warren E. Buffett, chairman of the board and CEO of Berkshire Hathaway.
Welcome. Good evening. Thank you all for being here. I must say I am beyond excited to be here and that I am in complete awe of the leaders on this stage and before me. We have our own Dean Thomas of the McDonough School of Business, Georgetown President Jack DeGioia, Chief Executive Officer of Bank of America, Mr. Brian Moynihan, and, though he really needs no introduction, Mr. Warren Buffett. My name is Lindsay Bruinsma. I am a second-year MBA candidate at the Georgetown McDonough School of Business with a focus on global business strategy and cause marketing. Over a decade ago, in 2003, I was fortunate to attend the International Relations program here at Georgetown University for high school students, and it had a significant impact on what I wanted to achieve in my career. I've actually been trying to get back here ever since. And so 2 years ago, when I decided to pursue my MBA, Georgetown's McDonough School was unquestionably it. I believed then, even more now I believe this, that Georgetown inspires students to positively sculpt the way that business and society interact. Programs such as the Global Social Enterprise Initiative, founded by my new friend, Professor Bill Novelli, have very much made this belief a reality. I am a product of GSEI and our wonderful sponsor, Bank of America, who partnered with the One campaign last year to provide the opportunity for 5 students to apply business skills towards social and economic impact. Last summer, I interned with RED as a global strategy fellow, RED being a cause marketing organization founded by Bono and Bobby Shriver under the One campaign umbrella. Through this opportunity, I was able to implement business solutions in a nonprofit setting. And with RED, I was able to work with global iconic brands to take on the HIV and AIDS epidemic in sub-Saharan Africa through a cause marketing model. I would like to personally thank Mr. Brian Moynihan for creating this opportunity, as well as Ms. Anne Finucane of Bank of America, and the entire GSEI family, including Executive Director LaDon Mentegi. I would also like to introduce and thank our president, Jack DeGioia, for his unwavering embrace of such programs as GSEI and for his continued dedication to community and service. Since 2001, President DeGioia has encouraged engagement at both a local and global level. Through this, he has given students not only the opportunity to follow in the footsteps of some very impressive leaders, but he has given them the opportunity to actively shape the new face of global leadership. And with that, please join me in introducing Georgetown University President, Dr. Jack J. DeGioia.
Thank you very much. You're beautiful. Well done. Well, thank you very much, Lindsay, for that introduction and for the example that you set through your commitment to social enterprise. We're very proud of you and your fellow students who are engaged in this very important work. Well, it's my pleasure to have this opportunity to welcome you all to Georgetown this evening for a very special conversation between Warren Buffett and Brian Moynihan. We're deeply grateful to them both for sharing their unique experiences and insights with us this evening. I'll have the opportunity to more formally introduce our guests in just a few moments, but first I wish to express my gratitude to some of the individuals who helped to make this evening possible. And I'd like to begin with the Dean of the McDonough School of Business, David Thomas, for his exceptional leadership and for fostering such important initiatives as the Global Social Enterprise Initiative. I'd also like to thank Bill Novelli, a distinguished professor of the practice at the business school and the founder of GSEI. His commitment to social enterprise, corporate responsibility, and social change has enriched our community here at Georgetown, and he will moderate our Q&A a little later this evening. The values at the core of the work that we examine here tonight are defining characteristics of the tradition that animates our university community, a tradition rooted in our Catholic and Jesuit identity, a tradition that compels us to create and share knowledge in service to our world. As a university, we have been guided by this tradition since 1789, and now for over 224 years, we've been building upon and reimagining it in new and innovative ways. The GSEI, through its work to cultivate leaders who focus on both economic and social value, is a concrete example of our commitment to living this tradition in our contemporary world. As you know, tonight's conversation is made possible by Bank of America, and I'd like to express my deep gratitude to two individuals: a proud Georgetown parent, Ann Finucane, Global Strategy and Marketing Officer at Bank of America, for her work in bringing us together this evening, and again, Brian Moynihan, Bank of America's CEO, for his leadership and support of this extraordinary event. Under Mr. Moynihan's leadership, Bank of America has deepened its commitment to community development, philanthropy, and environmental and sustainability initiatives. This includes a 10-year, $1.5 trillion community lending and investing goal, the largest ever by a financial institution. Since 2007, Mr. Moynihan has also led Bank of America's Global Diversity and Inclusion Council, a group that is dedicated to creating an inclusive work environment, and the company is consistently recognized as having one of the best environments in corporate America. Tonight, he will be engaging in a conversation with one of the world's great business leaders and philanthropists, Warren Buffett. Mr. Buffett, it's an honor to welcome you back to Washington, D.C. Many people may not know this, but this is a return home of sorts for Mr. Buffett. He attended high school just a few miles away at Woodrow Wilson High while his father was a member of Congress. Renowned and respected for his business and investment acumen, at the company that he has led since 1965, Mr. Buffett is also well known for his deep commitment to philanthropy and social enterprise. He co-founded, along with Bill and Melinda Gates, the Giving Pledge, an effort to encourage the wealthiest Americans to donate at least 50% of their net worth to philanthropy. About 5 years ago, he pledged 99% of his Berkshire Hathaway shares to charity, and last year, the shares he donated went to foundations that work to fight poverty, elevate the status of women and girls around the world, and support early childhood education, among many other causes. This led to his being ranked #1 in 2012's Philanthropy 50, a list of the nation's top philanthropists compiled by the Chronicle of Philanthropy. He has also given generously over the years to help support the work of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which focuses much of its efforts on global health and global development. So, Mr. Buffett, on behalf of our entire university community, it's an honor to welcome you to Georgetown. We're so pleased you could join us this evening, and it's now my privilege to present to you all for our conversation this evening, Mr. Warren Buffett and Mr. Brian Moynihan.
So good evening, Georgetown. It's a pleasure to be here. For those of you who were here last year, you know that we had Bono come talk to you about what he did. And Ann Finucane helped us arrange that through all the hard work she does for our company. And so this year, as I was thinking about with Ann who we should bring in, I actually talked to Bono. And he said, boy, if you want to bring a real rock star, bring Warren Buffett in. Because here's a guy who has done more for philanthropy than I can ever do, and et cetera. So last year we bought you a rock star. This year we bought you a real rock star. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask Warren a series of questions over 25, 30 minutes, and then we'll take your questions in the crowd and let the students have a chance to ask Warren about his experiences. And I'm going to start a little bit where the president left off, which is, this is your hometown. This is a part of your hometown. So what are your best memories about being around Georgetown? And
Well, I delivered papers at Georgetown Hospital 66 years ago. And I developed this affinity because in the hospital, people tipped. My regular customers, the one that knew me, never tipped. But I would go to the hospital, and one of the things they would do, they would give me cash tips, but they also would tell me if they were a woman that had given birth to a baby that was, we'll say, 8 pounds, 11 ounces, they would whisper that number to me. And the numbers racket was very big in Washington that time, and they felt they were giving me this terribly valuable information, the exact time in which the baby was born or something, and I was supposed to bet on that number in the numbers racket that day. So I have a lot of memories of of Georgetown, and I was here during World War II, which was really a fascinating time to be in Washington, and my dad being in Congress, it was really a window on an extraordinary time in America. And of course, at that time, we were probably more united than at any time in my lifetime about a common goal. I mean, that was the time when people like Bobby Feller and all the athletes, the day the war broke out, went down and enlisted, and people really did voluntarily in a very high percentage play by the rules in terms of gasoline rationing and sugar rationing and meat rationing and all that. And we all bought savings bonds at school to help out the troops. So it was quite a period.
well, so somewhere along there you started investing and changed the nature. And I've read stories that you started investing at 13, or whether they're true or not, but somewhere around that. And
it was 11.
what created the fascination with investing?
It took me 5 years. I had to save $120. It took me 5 years to get the $120 to buy a stock, 3 shares of City Service Preferred when I was 11. My dad originally was in the investment business. He really wasn't very interested in it, but I would go down on Saturday morning, and he had these books there in the office, and I read all those, and then I went to the Omaha Public Library, and I read every book on investments in the Omaha Public Library by the time we moved to Washington. And then when we got here, I had the Library of Congress.
Did you get through all those?
Oh, I read everything, and I just found it fascinating, and incidentally, I find it fascinating today. I mean, it's an activity. If you're a baseball player or something, your legs may go or something. Well, my legs have long gone, but it doesn't make any difference in what I do. So I literally have as much. I always have had fun working, but I have as much fun now as I've ever had in my life. I mean, I work with people I love doing what I love, and it just doesn't get any better than that.
Well, the quote is that you tap dance to work every day?
I tap dance to work, yeah.
And so what makes you do that?
Don't ask me to demonstrate, but it was nice to get that round of applause at the start, but I've learned that crowds now applaud at the start because I'm 83 and they're not sure I'll be around at the end of the talk.
I've shared enough dinners with you know that you have more energy than anybody I know. So let's switch to a little bit on the philanthropy side. So
Sure.
President DeGioia talked about the Giving Pledge. How did you come up with the idea with Bill, and how are you doing on it? I mean,
well, we're doing great. And it was, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, Bill and Melinda and I were out in California and talking, and I'm not exactly sure how it came up, but we decided to write David Rockefeller and ask if he would host a dinner in New York for about 16 or 18 people, just to talk about philanthropy. And Oprah Winfrey came, and Mayor Bloomberg was there, and it was a private dinner. And I started having these people talk around the table as to how they developed their philosophy of philanthropy. It must have taken us 2.5 hours or so to get around. I mean, people were really interested in it. So Bill and I were at that dinner. We decided that maybe there would be a possibility of taking this passion which these people had shown and going to other people that had a great deal of money and see if we could develop something where people would pledge at least half their net worth. And we now have about 115 people. I've been dialing for dollars. I call these billionaires up, and sometimes they tell me how they can't do it, and I decided, I tell them I'm going to write a book on how to live on $500 million, because apparently there's this great need. They just can't seem to figure out how to do it, and they need help. But it's been very rewarding, and I received a letter from one woman. She and her husband had over $10 billion, and she sent me a tie. She sent me 2 ties, and she sent me this handwritten note and said that they hadn't really faced it. It's a little like facing your own mortality to some extent, making that plan, and that's tough for people sometimes. And so she and her husband had changed things, and over half of that $10 billion was going to go to philanthropy. They do tend to postpone the decision. So I tell these people I call, the last will is what counts. But I tell them, if I'm talking to some 70-year-old, I say, do you really think your decision-making ability is going to be better when you're 95 with some blonde on your lap, or now? So let's get on board, fellas.
And I assume that convinces them maybe the 70-year-old decision's better at that point, right?
Well, Bill has done it. Bill has gotten people around the world because he travels more than I do. But what we're hoping is people do pick up on norms. I mean, when I was young, I read about Carnegie and Rockefeller and different people. Bill did too. And you do pick up behavior from those who come before. And we've collected letters from every one of these people. They're up on our website at thegivingpledge.org. And I think they're worth reading. They're pretty remarkable. And of course, what we really want to do is get the younger people, like Mark Zuckerberg's joined us, for example. And he obviously is going to appeal to a much wider group than I would. So we hope it becomes, this gospel of wealth that Andrew Carnegie came up with 100 years or so ago. That's influenced all kinds of people. Well, we've got better stories than that, on these letters. So I just hope it moves. Now, I want to emphasize one thing. Nobody in our group has given away $1 that in any way affects how they live. I mean, I have the much greater admiration, frankly, for the person who drops $5 or $1 in a collection plate on Sunday, where it makes a difference in whether they go take their kids to a movie or whether they go eat out or something of the sort. They are actually giving up something that has utility to them. I am giving up nothing that has utility to me. I have everything in the world I want that can be bought by money. So I have a whole bunch of stock certificates. They have no utility to me, and they can possibly have enormous utility to other people in vaccines or education or all kinds of things. So the people that give up something that actually can have utility to their family and give that to some other person so it has utility to them, those are the people I really think deserve the kudos. But it's still nice to go where the money is. I mean, it's the Willie Sutton approach. So if we can work on polio or something like that, and it takes big contributions, then we want to go after it.
So, I mean, the unique part of what you've done is with Bill and Melinda and their foundation, and on the one hand, how you're doing it, and secondly, that you've gone and said whatever the number will be, but almost all your wealth.
All my Berkshire
right. And so talk about the Gates relationship and why you chose them as opposed to creating your own foundation or something.
Well, originally my wife and I planned when we were in our 20s that when we had everything we needed, we would use the rest for society. And I thought she would outlive me. She was younger, and women live longer, and then she died in 2004. So I had to come up with a different plan. And if you've read Adam Smith and the specialization of labor, you know that if you're good at one thing, you're not necessarily good at another. And you ought to get the person, you ought to use your talents where they're most useful, and get other people to give their talents. So, when my wife had babies, I mean, I went to an obstetrician. I didn't deliver myself. When I get a toothache, I go to a dentist. So I wanted to go to people who were very good at giving away money and who were younger, energetic, smart, and had the same objectives in philanthropy that I did. And the basic principle of the Gates Foundation is that every human life has equal value. And if you start with that as your basic assumption, then a lot of things flow from that. And Bill and Melinda, as well as my children, because I have foundations for each one of my three children that are of significant size, and you can read the letters I wrote them up on the Berkshire Hathaway website. I do not direct them to do anything, but I do tell them to swing for the fences. I tell them if they succeed at everything they do in philanthropy, they're doing the wrong things, because the important things are the tough ones, and you're going to fail in some of those. But I have got much younger people, very energetic people, common objectives, and they work for nothing. So that's not a bad deal, Brian.
That stretches the money a long way. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the way I read it is that you require them to actually move the money out the other side.
They got to spend it. And when I die, all of the money has to be spent within 10 years after the estate is closed, because I do not think that I can pick out some little great-great-grandchild yet to be born, just because he has the right name of Buffett, or she has the right name, and they will be the best custodians. I mean, there'll be plenty of philanthropists 50 years after I die to take care of the problems of 50 years, but I want the money to get spent promptly, and I don't believe in trying to control things from the grave. I mean, I like to think I can think outside the box, but thinking outside of that particular box.
That may take a lot of philanthropy to figure that out. Recently I read an article about Eastlake and Tom Cousins. So this week, as many people know, the PGA finishes up its tournament at Eastlake, which is a golf course in Atlanta. And the story I read about the development is that you've now helped Tom Cousins in the development work he does with communities. Talk a little about that, because that's a little different than this type of thing.
Yeah, but it's the same theory of loving to back people who are putting their own time and energy and who are successful into a project that's worthwhile. Tom Cousins is a remarkable man who lives in Atlanta, just extraordinary. And he took this terrible, terrible neighborhood called Eastlake in Atlanta, and against a lot of community opposition, everything, it was crime-ridden, and nobody did it well in school and everything else. And he decided you had to apply a holistic approach to it, and you couldn't just attack this thing or that thing. And so he worked for probably 10 years to develop this entirely new community out of this total disaster. And then Tom and I talked about it, and I said, Tom, everybody's going to say that it can only be done because you're Tom Cousins and you live in Atlanta and you've done this. So he and I and a fellow named Julian Robertson, but primarily Tom, decided to see if we could replicate this in other communities. And it seemed to me that, and Tom, that New Orleans was a great one to do it. I mean, they've been racked by this, like Katrina and everything. So we've taken it to New Orleans, where we've got hundreds of people, and it's mixed income type community. I mean, we do not want to have it with everybody being subsidized. We want to create a new kind of community where people of different races, different economic conditions work together and play together. And it's been successful in New Orleans. We went to Indianapolis. It's been successful there, and we've got about 11 more towns we're working on now. And so Tom Cousins has really come up with something. He had an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal about a week ago describing this, but he's a fantastic human being. And when you get a chance to join forces with somebody that as high quality as that, and energetic and smart, and putting his own funds in it, you just got to jump at the chance.
That's good. We'll switch to the economy now. What's going on, and move from philanthropy to the economy, that you create your wealth off of, that you can do these wonderful, great things with. So what do you see in the economy and what you're seeing in your companies, your operating companies, and from an investor's point?
Well, our business has come back very well from 5 years ago when the panic hit. And it was a panic like nobody's ever seen. I mean, whatever you think about it, it was worse. I'm dead serious about that. We were right on the edge of the cliff. And fortunately, I give enormous credit to both Ben Bernanke and Hank Paulson and Tim Geithner. And frankly, even though I didn't vote for him, never voted for him, President Bush, I don't know how many of you have studied economics, but in Adam Smith they talk about comparative advantage, and Keynes talked about animal spirits and all those people. But President Bush really came out with the great economic insight of all times, and he did it in 10 words in September of 2008. He went out there from the White House and he said, if money doesn't loosen up, this sucker could go down. And I mean, that goes right up there. Tear down those plaques of Adam Smith. and he backed up. He backed up those fellows, and so we've come back from it. But businesses come back. You know, a lot of companies are having record profits, including many of ours, and the American populace as a whole has not come back. I mean, the inequality is getting wider. The Forbes 400, which just came out, showed aggregate wealth for the Forbes 400 of $2 trillion. You go back 20 years and that was 300 billion. So it's up 6 or 7 for one. It's different people to some extent, but this is the top. 300 billion to 2 trillion. And if you read the paper today, you'd have seen that the median income, you know, is the same place it was in terms of real purchasing power from 1989. It hasn't changed. So the inequality is getting wider. The rich are doing extremely well, extraordinarily well. And business is doing well. Business profit margins are terrific compared to the record historically. Business returns on tangible equity are terrific. But most, you know, a great many people in our country, if you take the bottom 20% of households, that's 24 million households or something like that, housing, you know, close to about 60 million people. You know, the top level is $22,000. And I don't want to try to live on $22,000 with a couple of kids. So we've got an economy that is delivering $50,000 of GDP per capita, and we've got an awful lot of people that aren't living well. So we have learned how to turn out lots of goods and services, but we haven't learned as well how to have everybody share in the bounty that we have.
So how do you think, is that we just got to grow out of it to provide?
Well, we're growing. We're growing. Yeah. I mean, if you take even 2% a year, if you think about it, people feel very unhappy with 2% a year, but the population grows 1% a year. So that means 1% per capita real growth. That means in 20 years, a generation, there's a 20% gain in GDP per capita. That's not bad in a generation. But the question is how it gets distributed. Right. But this country will grow. This system works. You know, in my lifetime, I was born in 1930. I was conceived in 1929 because my dad was a stock salesman, and after the crash, he didn't have anything to do. Nobody. So I look back with great fondness on the 1929 crash. But since 1930, since I was born in 1930, real GDP per capita has increased 6 for 1. Just think of that, 6 for 1. I mean, you went centuries when nothing happened. Right. for people, and this country works. I mean, I consider the luckiest person on a probabilistic basis that ever lived is the baby that's born today in the United States. I mean, it is a fabulous country, and the market system works, all kinds of things. But we do have to, in my view, we have to make sure that everybody participates to a reasonable degree. We don't want equality of results, but we also want a base level that's satisfactory for our people.
So you talked about the George Bush's economic statement about it could go down. What do you think the lessons are of the last couple of cycles that you've seen from an investor standpoint? We've got a lot of young kids out there. You've lived through multiple cycles in the 50, 60 years plus you've been investing, 70 years investing. What are the lessons, and what, these are young people, what should they take away?
The lessons are that people will continue to make the same mistakes they've made. I mean, humans, and it doesn't correlate to IQ particularly. I mean, when they get greedy, and we had this huge bubble in the most important asset the American public has, housing. I mean, so you had a huge bubble in something that you could borrow heavily against. So you could run a margin account effect on a house instead of stocks, and the conditions got very lax. And so when that bubble popped, but people came into that gradually. When they get fearful, it happens all at once. I mean, when people get scared, they all want to leave at one time. And we had them all want to leave at one time, and that'll happen again. It'll happen with a different set of circumstances, but the human animal will keep behaving pretty much the way it has in the past. So we will have periodic recessions. We'll have an occasional panic, which doesn't all recessions don't come from panics. But the good news is, if you look at the 20th century, in the 20th century, we had 2 world wars, We had the Great Depression. We had the flu epidemic. We had the Cold War. We had the atom bomb, you name it. The Dow Jones average went from 66 to 11,497, with all these terrible things happening supposedly at various times. America works. And when I bought my first stock when I was 11, that was in the spring of 1942. And that was a couple months after Pearl Harbor. And we were getting clobbered in the Pacific at Corregidor and Bataan. I mean, the Death March of Bataan. And in the European theater, the Blitz of England was on. And the Dow was at about 100. But just look at where we are now. I mean, the country really works. The trick is, it seems to me the obligation of a society as prosperous as ours is to figure out how nobody gets left too far behind.
Right. It was interesting because last year Bono's speech was a lot about how America is a society of dreams and you can accomplish more here. It was actually one of the best speeches about the optimism America could have by a person who's not American by birth. So and I know you carry that optimism. So after all this, what makes you most optimistic for the next decade about America? Or next couple decades?
Just imagine, 1789. Just go back just a few hundred years. There wasn't anything here, in this country. And Sir Christopher Wren, I think, that designed St. Paul's Cathedral is buried there, and there's a little plaque there, and it says, if you seek my monument, look about you. Well, I say, in America, if you seek America's monument, look about you. This country has all come about in a few hundred years. We had less than 4 million people, when we became a country. China had 300 million people at that time. Europe had about 75 million. They were just as smart as we were. They worked just as hard as we did. They had natural resources that were similar to ours. And yet we ended up with a quarter of the world's GDP, a few hundred years later. We've got something that works, and we don't want to mess that up. We want to figure out what we do with this abundance better as we go along. But you don't have to worry about the system working. But you will have periodic recessions, and you will have an occasional panic brought on by something that who knows where it comes from. The thing to remember at that time, I wrote an op-ed piece in the New York Times in the fall of 2008, and I said, that the country will come back. It'll go through a big recession and everything, but it'll come back, and it's coming back. So don't ever worry about America. It'll tell you, you're in the right place.
So you've been famous for your investment strategy on basically that follows the opposite side of that principle is invest when the chips are down and ride it up. That served you well. So what's your favorite time that you were able to accomplish that, when you caught somebody down and moved up?
I always think my favorite time's going to be tomorrow. It's always been fun. And there's a company here in Washington called Geico. And I first got exposed to that in 1950. I was 20 years. I was 19 years. It was 51. I'm sorry. I was 20 years old, and I came down here, and I came down on a Saturday because I'd learned that my professor who I worshiped at Columbia named Ben Graham was the chairman. I got down here and the door was locked. When I went to the building, because it was Saturday, and I pounded on the door, and some janitor let me in, and a marvelous fellow named Lorimer Davidson spent 4 hours with me teaching me all about insurance, and he helped me so much in life. But you're going to get help by some wonderful people in life. It's a great thing to remember later on when you get to be my age, that all the help you've received from different people, because nobody does it alone. Obama got in trouble when he said that in the campaign, that nobody does it by themselves. Nobody does do it by themselves. We all sit in the shade of trees that were planted by others. So it's obligatory, I think, to plant a few trees ourselves if we've had good luck. It's been a great ride, but it's not over.
So you've owned. When did you actually buy Geico? When did you invest in Geico the first time?
Geico I bought. I met Lorimer Davidson when I was finishing up at Columbia, and then I started selling securities when I got out. And I went out to my Aunt Alice, and my Aunt Alice would have bought anything from me. And so she bought 100 shares of Government Employees Insurance. It was the first stock I ever sold. And then a lot of years passed, and Mr. Davidson was very kind to me in a variety of ways. But I went in different directions. And then in 1976, the company got in big trouble because they miscalculated their reserves, and they were going broke. And so I came back here, and I bought a third of the company in the market in a very short period of time. And then in 1995, by now our third had become a half because they'd repurchased their shares. And I went out to see Mr. Davidson, who was out in Bethesda. He was 96 or 97. And he had a bunch of stock in Geico with no cost basis because he'd held it forever. And I said, Davey, if I make an offer for this company for cash, you're going to pay a big tax. And of course, if you die with the stock, you don't have that tax and you get a stepped up basis. So I'm not going to make this offer unless it's all right with you. And he said to me, he said, Warren, he said, I've hoped for this all my life. And so we bought the rest of the company. He was a great man.
That's terrific. Well, let's turn it over to some student questions. So they're going to put a microphone out here, and we'll have you queue up and let you have questions for Warren or. All right. Why don't you let's take the first question. Tell us who you are and ask away. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, I'm Kasim Tavalali, senior in SFS. I was wondering if you have any stock tips for any of the students. You know, we're all trying to make a little living.
I didn't think they taught that at Georgetown. The best investment I ever made, well, I bought a book in 1949 by a fellow named Ben Graham called The Intelligent Investor. I don't remember what I paid. But aside from what I paid for my 2 marriage licenses, that was the best investment I ever made. It's very important to have the right framework. You need to have an approach to investing that's sound. And Graham's approach is simple, but some people adopt to it, and which I did immediately, and most people don't. But if you have the right philosophy, you will find opportunities as you go through the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And frankly, you're most likely to find them when in periods like 5 years ago when we were having the panic. I mean, stocks sell at silly prices from time to time. Most stocks at one time or another sell at very silly prices. And it doesn't take a high IQ to figure out that they're cheap, but it does take a temperament that's willing to step up and actually act. I tell people, if they're going in the investment business, if you got 160 IQ, sell 30 points to somebody else because you won't need it. I mean, I mean, I figured out very early, you don't have to be that smart in this business, which is fortunate, but you do have to have the right temperament. And you have to be able to ignore what other people are saying and simply look at the facts and decide, is this stock which is selling at X worth 2X? And occasionally you'll find things like that. And when you don't find them, you don't do anything. So that's my generalized stock tip, no names.
I'll make it simpler. Just buy Bank of America and you'll be set.
Yeah.
It worked all right for him.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
The next question, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Nicholas Walker. I'm a sophomore in the SFS as well. So, Mr. Buffett, in the past you invested in China, South Korea, and Israel. And recently you partnered with 3G Capital and Jorge Paulo Lemann from Brazil over for the Heinz deal. Does this mean, are you tempted to venture into the Brazil market next?
I didn't get the question.
The question, you did the Heinz deal. The question is, are you going to invest in Brazil next?
Oh, I don't know where I'm going to invest next. That's what makes my job interesting. I mean, I'm not kidding. I mean, if you went out and played golf and every drive went in the hole, you'd give up. The game wouldn't be interesting. I mean, what's interesting is when you get in the rough and have to come out and a few things like that. So I love the fact that I don't know what I'm going to do next. You mentioned the Israel investment. In 2006, in the fall, I got a letter from a fellow, and I never heard of him, and I never heard of the company he was talking about. But he said, my name is Eitan Wertheimer, and I want to tell you a little about my company, Ishkar. The letter was a page and a half long, and he said, if he sold the company, the family sold the company, the only company they wanted to sell it to was Berkshire Hathaway. And if I was interested, they'd be glad to come over from Israel and explain it to me. And it just jumped off the page that this was an interesting idea. So I emailed them, and they came over very shortly, and we bought the business. We handed them $4 billion for 80% of a company where I'd never seen it or anything. Eitan kept saying, you got to come over to Israel and see the plants and everything. You won't believe how wonderful they are. And I said, Eitan, I don't go to Council Bluffs, Iowa. I am doing fine in Omaha. And he said, no, you got to see it. I said, no, I don't. I said, we can make a deal without seeing it. He said, well, if you buy the company, will you come and see it? I said, if we buy the company, I'll come. So we bought the company, and I went over there, and it's true. I've never seen plants like this. It was the greatest operation I've ever seen. And Eitan said to me, he said, that's why I want you to come over to see these things. I said, listen, Eitan, if I'd come and seen them, I'd have paid more money. We have a wonderful partnership with the people in Israel. But I don't know tomorrow, our partnership with the people in Brazil, with Georgie Paulo Lemon and his associates, they are sensational people. I got to know Georgie Paulo when I was on the board of Gillette with him. And the opportunity to buy into a wonderful business like Heinz and to be partners, and they'll do all the heavy lifting. They run the place with Georgie Paulo and his associates. I mean, it's a great opportunity for us. And I don't know what the opportunity will be tomorrow. With Georgie Paulo, as last December, I was going out to Boulder, Colorado, where he had a group that met, and he said, I think I've got an idea might interest you when I get out there. And so I went out there, and as we came back on the plane, he explained what he was thinking about in terms of Heinz, and I said, count me in. And I will tell you one other thing, which is quite impressive about him. After I said that and went a little further in the thing, he sent me a one-page governance description of how it would work between the two of us, and he sent me a very brief description of what he thought would be a fair deal for both of us. I didn't have to change a word. I mean, those are the kind of people you like to associate with.
Next question.
Hi. You mentioned that people will make the same mistakes in terms of the boom-bust cycle. But there have been several recent financial developments, such as the creation of derivatives, which has since exploded recently, and you once called derivatives weapons of mass destruction.
Right.
Now that derivatives are a $700 trillion industry, do you see this as setting the stage for the next financial crisis?
It's very hard to tell. That we've enacted Dodd-Frank, and if you look at what happened in September and October of 2008, there were some extraordinary things done. The Federal Reserve poured $85 billion into AIG, and if they hadn't, our world would be very different. Hank Paulson guaranteed money market funds at a time when 30 million Americans with money market funds were panicking, and when $300 billion in 3 days had gone out of the non-government money market funds, 125 of it had gone back into the government. 300 billion, that was almost equal to the deposits of Wells Fargo or Wachovia at the time, which were then two separate institutions. Both of those authorities have essentially been taken. I don't think they can do that under Dodd-Frank. I don't think that Bernanke could do what he did, and I don't think that Paulson can do what he did. When there's a panic, the only thing that will stop it, basically, is when somebody who has the ability and the will says, I'm going to do whatever it takes. And basically, that's what Bernanke and Paulson, and finally, Congress in a kind of a reluctant way, but said to the American public, and you could believe it. If Bernanke said, I'm going to do whatever it takes, nobody knows what Section 13.3 of the Federal Reserve Act is, and it wasn't probably meant to do what he did with it, but he did it. And the same way with they call it the Exchange Stabilization Fund of the Treasury. It was enacted back in 1934. Nobody dreamt it would be used to take care of money market funds. But you had these strong characters who had the ability to print money in the case of Bernanke, and they said, we're going to do whatever it takes, and the president was behind them. That is the way you end a real panic. And I worry, actually, that Congress doesn't like to give anybody that much authority, and it bothers them that the Fed has all this authority, or that Paulson acted as he did in TARP. And I tip my hat to them, and I'm not sure. There will be another panic. Where it comes from, who knows? But when that time comes, the question will be, are the people who have panicked, who have frozen, who have caused the economic engine to stop, will they believe and come right back and be doing something? And I'm not sure whether what's been enacted is a plus or a minus in that regard. Regardless, the country will come through. But it's very hard to write regulations that will keep people from acting foolishly, particularly when acting foolishly has been proven very profitable over the preceding few years. It's just the way it works. Humans, they all think they're Cinderella at the ball, and they think, as the night goes along, the music gets better and the drinks flow and everything, and they all think they're going to leave at 2 minutes to 12. And of course, there's no clocks on the wall, and they're still dancing. So it'll happen again. But buy when it happens.
Next question.
I'll be buying.
Hi, my name's John Ruff. I'm from Georgia, so I'm familiar with the work over at East Lake.
Oh, that's great.
Appreciative. But you talked a little bit about income inequality. But if you look at class mobility rates, and if you look at average household income for middle-class families, measured with inflation, a lot of these rates have been trending down since the 1970s. And some may argue that it's harder today for the middle class than it's been in 30 years. And I was wondering if you had any more thoughts on how a rising tide can lift all boats, and not just the yachts.
Yeah. Well, that's what's happened. It's like John Kennedy talked about, a rising tide lifting all yachts. And the yachts have been lifted, like I say, for the top 400 from 300 billion to 2 trillion just in the last 20 years. There is a very, I think, structural problem as a market system gets more and more specialized. If you go back to an agrarian society like we had a couple hundred years ago, with most people working on a farm, most people fit most job requirements. I mean, it was that as the world has become more and more specialized, I think we keep moving away from that. So a market system will not pay well for a significant percentage of society. They aren't needed to keep GDP itself going up and people at the top. And I think government has to address that. I think it's, I sometimes toss out to students this proposition. Imagine that it's 24 hours before you're born, and you're sitting there, Johnny or Joni, we don't know yet, and you're in the womb, and a genie comes. And the genie says, John or Joni, you strike me as a remarkable potential human being, and I'm going to give you an enormous responsibility. I'm going to let you decide the world, how the world is going to work into which you're going to emerge. You can decide on the economic system, the social system, the political system. You design it. And whatever you design, that's going to be the system in which you live, your children live, grandchildren live. And you, being wise beyond your minus 24 hours of age, say, I know all about you genies. What's the catch? And the genie says there's one catch. Just before you emerge, having designed the system, put it in cement, you're going to go over to that barrel over there that has 7 billion slips in it, one for every human being in the world, and you're going to pull out a slip. It may say male, it may say female, it may say white, it may say black, it may say infirm, it may say strong, it may say bright, it may say below average. It may say United States, it may say Bangladesh. Now, not knowing which ticket you're going to pull out, what kind of a world do you want to design? Well, you certainly want to design a world that produces lots of goods and services and keeps producing more and more. You want a lot of stuff around. It could be the world's fairest society, but if it's on a barren desert island, it isn't going to do anybody good. So you really want something that works in terms of output. But once you have something that works in terms of output, you certainly want something that eliminates fear from everybody's life. Now, that doesn't just mean a lot of cops. It means fear of old age, fear of health, all of those problems. And you certainly want a system not knowing what tickets you're going to get that takes care of the people that don't survive so well in that market system, which maximizes the amount of output, your first goal. And I think we've done a wonderful job at the first stage. We have learned how to turn out lots of stuff. We have not thought as much, although we've thought a fair amount. I mean, when Social Security came in and all of that, I mean, this country has developed in terms of thinking about how a rich family should behave. But we have not, I think we are in the stage where we need to focus more on making sure that the people who get the bad tickets do better than they are. And, you know, we said that blacks were 3/5 or slaves were 3/5 of a person back when we started. And said, you know, we said all men are created equal in 1776, and in 1789 we said blacks are 3/5 of a person. You know, we not only said all men are created equal, but in the Gettysburg Address, you know, Lincoln repeated it. It was 1920 before we passed the 19th Amendment for women. So we treated women as an essentially different class for all those years. So I think we've gone significantly in the right direction in terms of behaving better as a society, and I think we've gone terrifically in the right direction in terms of turning out lots of stuff. But I think we have to address the question of how do you treat the people that are left behind in a system that maximizes the output of goods and services. And that can only come through government.
Next question.
Good evening. My name is James Fishback. I'm in the School of Foreign Service, first year. It's no doubt that you're an outspoken fan of Ben Bernanke, but he's going to be stepping down in January of next year. Whomever takes over the position, do you think that they should continue the Fed's controversial buyback program, and if so, for how long?
Well, I think they should take Bernanke's approach, which he says he's going to keep doing it until he sees more improvement in the economy. And I think he's been mildly disappointed, not hugely disappointed, but mildly disappointed in the rate of improvement in the economy in the last few years, and therefore, just the other day, he said he's going to extend it further until he sees it. So he's not prejudging exactly when it's going to happen. He's telling you the conditions under which he'll change, and the economy is getting better. We are in an experiment which hasn't really been tried before. I mean, Fed has a $3.5 trillion balance sheet, and buying securities is usually easier than selling securities, as sometimes people find out. So we don't know how this game plays out. And just the announcement, whenever it was a few months ago, or the hint that tapering was going to occur, that had some significant market reactions, probably 100 basis points or so in the 10-year. And what will happen when they actually, if they actually try to deleverage the Fed? I mean, what has happened is the American public deleveraged and the government leveraged up through the Fed. If the Fed deleverages that in any big way, that will be a new experiment. And
but Warren, as we were talking earlier, the question is, when they do that, the economy has to be growing faster.
And
the piece people don't take into account is they're clear that they're going to stay there until the economy grows faster.
And he has no pressure on him. In fact, the Fed is the greatest hedge fund in history. I mean, you've got $1.1 trillion financed by currency and circulation, which doesn't cost anything, and they got about $1.8 trillion or $1.9 trillion for the banks at 25 basis points. And I mean, the Fed is going to make $80 billion or something like that. The Fed is the fourth largest contributor to the United States government's revenues that there is now. That wasn't the case a few years back, but it's 80 or 90 billion a year probably. And it is under no pressure, none whatsoever, to have to deleverage. So it can pick its time, and if you have somebody wise there, and I think Bernanke's wise, and I certainly expect his successor to be, it can be handled. But it is something that's never quite been done on this scale. It'll be interesting to watch.
No, it will be, and we've seen the lesson in the market moving ahead and back just based on the last 30 days. So I think we're going to take one more question, and then from the next student.
Hi, Mr. Warren Buffett. My name is Xue Li, and I'm from China. I'm currently a graduate student in Georgetown. My friend, Dennis Zhao, and we are both a very big fan of you and your friend Charlie. And we read his book, which is very interesting. He had this whole system of criteria on how to evaluate a company. it's all very confusing, but he said that Warren and I are always staying away from the industries we don't know. So you have candies, railways, and Coca-Cola. But now the world is changing, and we are living in a new era. The business models are changing. The B2C platforms, everybody is shopping online. Maybe in a few years, everyone is going to pay with their iPhones, and Bank of America no longer issues credit cards. So non-profit is a new model, and
So what's a dinosaur like me going to do? Yeah.
yeah, there are just so many things you don't know about.
He'll take out his flip phone and show you, so he's not going to be one.
This is my new one.
What?
It's going to take.
I just turned in the one Alexander Graham Bell gave me. But,
Okay. So the question is, the business models are changing, the world are changing. The new technology, they're changing everything. There's no way you can just stay out of it and stay with the traditional. Now, for the private investors, especially in the venture capital industry, what would you think is the most important thing, the key in evaluating a company? I'm not asking about doing mediocre, I'm not asking about being average, but about excellent, remarkable. Just name one thing.
The most important thing is to be able to define which ones you can come to an intelligent decision on and which ones are beyond your capacity to evaluate. You don't have to be right about thousands and thousands and thousands of companies. You only have to be right about a couple. I met Bill Gates on July 5th, 1991. We were out in Seattle, and Bill said, "You've got to have a computer." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "You can do your income tax on it." I said, "I don't have any income. Berkshire doesn't pay a dividend." He said, "Well, you can keep track of your portfolio." And I said, "I only have one stock." I said, and he says, "It's going to change everything." And I said, "Well, will it change whether people chew gum?" And he said, "Well, probably not." And I said, "Well, will it change what kind of gum they chew?" And I said, "Well, then I'll stick to chewing gum and you stick to computers, you know." I don't have to understand all kinds of business. There's all kinds of business I don't understand. But there's thousands of opportunities there. I did understand the Bank of America, you know, and I'm able to do that. I'm able to understand some given percentage. But Ted Williams wrote a book called The Science of Hitting. And in The Science of Hitting, he's got a diagram, shows him at the plate. And he's got the strike zone divided into 77 squares, each the size of a baseball. And he says, if I only swing at pitches in my sweet zone, which he shows there, and he has what his batting average would be, which is 400. If he had to swing at low outside pitches, but still in the strike zone, his average would be 230. He said the most important thing in hitting is waiting for the right pitch. Now, he was at a disadvantage because if the count was 0-2 or 1-2 or so on, even if that ball was down where he was only going to bat 230, he had to swing at it. In investing, there's no called strikes. People can throw Microsoft at me and, you know, you name it, any stock, General Motors, and I don't have to swing. And nobody's going to call me out on called strikes. I only get a strike called if I swing at a pitch and miss. So I can wait there and look at thousands of companies day after day, and only when I see something I understand and when I like the price at which it's selling, then if I swing, if I hit it, fine. If I miss it, it's a strike. But it's an enormously advantageous game. And it's a terrible mistake to think you have to have an opinion on everything. You only have to have an opinion on a few things. In fact, I've told students, if when they got out of school, they got a punch card with 20 punches on it, and that's all the investment decisions they got to make in their entire life, they would get very rich because they would think very hard about each one. And you don't need 20 right decisions to get very rich. You know, 4 or 5 will probably do it over time. So I don't worry too much about the things I don't understand. If you understand some of these businesses that are coming along and can spot things on, if you can spot on Amazon, for example, I mean, it's a tremendous accomplishment what Jeff Bezos has done. And I tip my hat to him. He's a wonderful businessman. He's a good guy, too. But could I have anticipated that he would be the success and 10 others wouldn't be? I'm not good enough to do that. But fortunately, I don't have to. You know, I don't have to form an opinion on Amazon. And I did form an opinion on the Bank of America, and I form an opinion on Coca-Cola. I mean, Coca-Cola's been around since 1886. There's 1.8 billion 8-ounce servings of Coca-Cola products sold every day. Now, if you take 1 penny and get 1 penny extra, that's $18 million a day. And 18 million times 365 is 7 billion, 3 less 730 billion, or $6,570 million. So annually, $6,570 million from 1 penny. Do you think Coca-Cola is worth a penny more than, Joe's Cola? I think so. So, and I've got about 127 years of history that would indicate it. So those are the kind of decisions I like to make. And you may have an entirely different field of expertise than I would have, and probably much more up to date in terms of the kind of businesses that we're seeing evolve. And you can get very rich if you just understand a few of them and understand their future. But fortunately, I don't have to. I mean, if we go into Heinz, and I look at people pouring ketchup on, hamburgers and potatoes, I don't think it's going to change. And the nice thing about it, some products travel. Some products don't travel. Candy bars don't travel well. I mean, if you look at the Cadbury bars in England, they don't sell well here. And if you look at the Hershey bars here, they don't sell as well someplace else. Soft drinks travel, and ketchup travels. I like products that travel.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Warren. Warren, I want to thank you for taking the time to work with the students today. And I think for all the students out there, just think about this. This is a person who, with a passion, he still has at 83 to make that right investment decision. But importantly, what we talked a lot earlier about is the ability to try to do something with all that wealth that will help a pretty near-term set of goals in society. And I think you will find very few people in the world have been able to do both things so well as Warren Buffett has, and there's a lesson to learn for all of us from that. So thank you for spending the time.
Thank you.
So, wow. That's probably the first time in my life I ever heard a positive outcome for the great economic crash of 1929. So, Brian, thank you for bringing us a rock star. We just heard a terrific conversation, a terrific discussion about economic impact and social impact and how the two fit together. And before this conversation, Brian Moynihan had a session with some of our business students in which he talked about community lending, philanthropy, he talked about environmental initiatives, and he talked about how they are good business as well as good for society. And this is the right place. Georgetown is the right place for that. Our president, Jack DeGioia, he talks about global human development. And the dean of our business school, David Thomas, he talks about being in service to business and society. And that's why our Global Social Enterprise Initiative is flourishing and why it's in the right place. Our organization, the Global Social Enterprise Initiative, is driven by students. In fact, it was started by students. There's a student here, I should say an alumnus here, I don't know where he is, Rahul Pasarnikar, who flew in. He's a McKinsey executive. He flew in just for this conversation. He helped to conceptualize this initiative. And Rahul, wherever you are, keep the good work going. LaDawn Mantegi and I, we think that students power what we do. And we have many projects going, and students are involved in every one of them. And we're very thankful for that. And I can tell you that I love Georgetown. I love Georgetown because I come in here every day and I rub elbows with these students who are tomorrow's leaders. And every night I go home thinking the future is really in good hands. So look for future GSEI events. Look on our website. Thank you again for this wonderful conversation. We've got to applaud these two gentlemen. I'm sorry that not every student got to ask a question, but there's always email. And would you please let the first two rows leave because there are some security issues involved. Thank you very much.
Who would like to ask some questions of the great Oracle of Omaha about philanthropy? By the way, I just noticed that Lunch with You just was auctioned for charity for I think it was $2.2 million?
2,166. Yeah. It's the tip that kills you.
So we all get it for free. So get your $2 million worth right now. I will ask, if you ask a question, do something nice for somebody today. How about that as a start? Who would like to ask Warren a question? Then right up front, Jay Walker.
Warren, can you tell us a little bit about your giving pledge and the progress you're making in that area? I know it's close to your heart.
Yeah, we've made far more progress than I would have originally anticipated. I was hoping when we started we might get to 50 people or something of the sort. I think we're at 128 currently. The last time I was here, we had nobody outside the United States. I think we've got a dozen or so now, and it's been a success not only in terms of numbers, but it's been a terrific success in terms of participation. We get together once a year for the whole group, and then we have some other sessions beyond that, and those have been terrific learning sessions for everybody involved. We draw the resources from our own group. People tell about their failures in philanthropy, their successes. They tell about their special areas of interest, whatever it may be, and we all come away smarter. So it's working. It's working in terms of numbers. It's working in terms of, I think, increasing to some extent the current philanthropy of the group, and I think it's helped all of us be smarter about the subject.
Back there, Malala.
Thank you so much. My question is that how effective girls' education can be to society, and in what ways can it help a society to develop? And I would like to just hear your ideas about girls' education, because it's my ambition to work for it, so I'd love to hear your views. Thank you.
I didn't quite get the question.
Girls' education? I know you've actually been very vocal about that in the last year.
Yeah, I was born in 1930. I had two sisters that were every bit as smarter than I am. They had better personalities.
Better looking.
Yeah, much. I don't even want to get into that. And our parents loved us equally. Our teachers were equally interested in us, but implicit in everything that happened in school or at home was the idea that if my sisters married, well, that was a great accomplishment, whereas if I could do anything. And back in 1776, we wrote a document that said all men are created equal, and then in 1789, we came up with a second document that said that blacks were 3/5 of a person, and that if you read Article 2 of the Constitution, they slip in a number of male pronouns when talking about who could be president of the United States, and you had to fast forward to 1920 until the 19th Amendment was passed. But even after that, we had 33 justices appointed to the Supreme Court before a woman was appointed. Now, the odds of that being by accident are 8 billion to 1. So we are an aspirational society, though. We do make progress, but just think of the talent we wasted, over those hundreds of years. I mean, it makes me very optimistic about the country, because if you look how far we came using half of the talent in the country, just wait till we use 100%, and I'm dead serious about that. So I saw it with my sisters firsthand, and I didn't want my daughter to have the same kind of life, or my granddaughters, and we've made a fair amount of progress in this, but it is kind of astounding when you think of a country that founding document started out pretty much with all men are created equal, and then it's taken all of this time to really get where there's, in many industries or professions, all kinds of activities, that women are given anything like the same shot as a male. If I'd been born a female in 1930, I would have caused a lot of trouble.
Who else has a question? In the room. Right there, Chris.
Incidentally, the foundation that was designed to actually give away all of the money of the Buffett family, my plans got modified because my wife died before I did, and she was to be in charge of it. But that foundation still, I think, is number 4 or number 5 in terms of annual giving in the country, and a majority of the trustees are women.
And it goes on to reproductive rights.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chris Birch, you had a question.
Last night you mentioned Li Ka-shing and the amazing moment he had with you about giving to his 2 sons. I think the audience would love to hear that. But most importantly, I'm fortunate enough to spend enough time in China, fortunate and unfortunate, but there's no giving at all. It's actually very disturbing in their approach to giving. Do you have any comments for us to travel around the world to actually take this a little bit further and spread kind of the good giving that the people in this room give, and any things that worked when you spoke to Li Ka-shing and he made that statement?
Yeah, I must have given a misimpression. He did not say it specifically to me. He gave it at a Forbes meeting over in Hong Kong about 7 or so years ago. But what he said, Li Ka-shing probably is as revered as any business person in the greater Asian world, certainly in Hong Kong. And he's about my age. And when he was 75 or so, he gave this talk, and he said that he came from a culture that for thousands of years had essentially said, you leave your money to your male heirs. And it wasn't questioned, it was just the way it should be. And he said that basically that when he came to that dinner, that before that he had 2 sons, and he said, as of this moment, I now have a 3rd son, and that 3rd son is society. And I'm going to treat them as if they were my son, and a 1/3 of my fortune is going to go back to society as a whole instead of getting passed along in a dynastic fashion. That was profound. I mean, if you took who was giving it, who was saying it, circumstances of it, it had real impact. It probably had more than the gospel of wealth had in the United States. Now, you don't change thousands of years of behavior, with a single speech, but that has had a real impact. And Bill Gates and I, Bill's done way more work outside the United States by far than I have, but we were in China together and India together, and that talk of Li Ka-shing's had an impact. We are just now, I don't know whether it happened last week or it'll happen next week, but we will get our first member in China. It's interesting. We had a favorable reaction in China, including by the government. It didn't start out that way, but after it became clear that we weren't there to try and change their society, they reacted really quite well at all levels. But there was this one thought, which was kind of interesting, that we ran into. To some extent, a private philanthropist giving money, say, to medical research or education, in some minds in China, that's a reflection on the government, because the government is there to provide those things. And if implicit in your gift is the fact that the government is not doing it properly, it has a different effect than if somebody here gives money to education or health or something of the sort. So that there was a little bit of a lingering worry about that. But when we had a dinner, this was 5 years ago or so, we had a dinner of about 50 or so billionaires there. The questions we got were very similar to when we have dinners here. I mean, people talked about their children, they talked about the continuity of their business, they talked about how do you go about it, and what about the waste and you would not have known that conversation was not taking place in Omaha or New York. So I think there will be a proliferation of philanthropy. I'm almost sure, but I've had two people come from South Africa to Omaha just to talk about the Giving Pledge. And one of them and his wife have already signed up and joined, and they're dead serious about this. They came to our annual meeting this year and the previous year, right after they joined. So it may take some time, but it will spread throughout the world, and that's, norms change. When Carnegie did what he did, or Rockefeller did what he did, or whomever, Julius Rosenwald, that moved the norm a little bit in the United States. It had some effect on the next generation. Who knows, what? But somebody in the library is reading about them who someday is going to come up with some social arrangement on internet or something that'll make billions of dollars, and that will have some influence. So we've got the trend going in the right direction, not only in the United States, but I really think around the world, although it's going to lag what happens in the United States.
Okay. Right up front here.
A lot of the people here in the room have their own foundations. They serve on endowment boards and other foundation boards. And you've been very eloquent about how putting more and more money into hedge funds is maybe not the right thing to do. But as we know, assets are pouring into hedge funds more and more. And you've had your contests where you've showed you've been able to outperform by being in the S&P 500. So why is it that you've been so eloquent about this and more people are doing exactly the opposite, putting more and more money into the hedge funds?
Well, maybe I'm wrong. Over time, people will figure out, what works best. I do have this bet. It's now been almost 7 years. 7 or 8 years ago, I offered to bet anyone. We'd each put up $500,000, and the $1 million would go to the charity of the winner. And I would bet them that they couldn't pick out 5 fund-to-funds that would outperform an S&P index fund. And I made that offer to the whole world. And one group, we had only one, and they put up we each put up $350,000 or so. We bought a 10-year zero coupon bond. I named Girls Inc. as the beneficiary if I won. You can read about this if you go to the internet. There's something called Long Bets, which is really quite an interesting website because it has all of these different bets that have a long-term future on it, and with people betting on each side, giving a short description of why they believe what their side to be true. And you will find our bet described there, and you'll find what I said, and you'll find what the people on the other side said. I've got some great friends on the other side, and when interest rates fell to practically nothing, our zero coupon bonds went to essentially almost par 4 or 5 years ahead of time. So we sold the bonds for $950,000, and we put that all in Berkshire Hathaway, and I guaranteed that it would be worth at least $1 million at the end. So actually, at the moment, the prize is up to about $1.5 million or $1.6 million. And I will tell you, the people at Girls Inc. at Omaha are feeling very good. I mean, we're about, the S&P is about 30 points ahead of the 5 fund-to-funds selected. But there will be hedge funds that will do extremely well. I mean, but whether there will be hundreds or thousands of them, and whether you can pick them ahead of time is another.
It's tough to run the 20% VIG.
Yeah.
Katie, you had a question. You don't need a mic.
When asked to give a speech on the virtues of humility, it's almost a paradox of sorts.
She put you in a box.
Yeah, I've got a partner, Charlie Munger, says he admires humility enormously, but he wasn't quite given his fair share. But no, I'm going to be 84 in August, and by this point I know I've got a lot to be humble about. Is the question specifically to philanthropy in terms of it, or?
I think how does you do have a lot of humility. I'll say that. How does that affect you as a philanthropist?
Well, I'm not sure how it. I certainly feel, for example, at the Giving Pledge, and so do Bill and Melinda. I mean, we incorporated this, and we are not there to tell anybody when to give, what to give to, how. We do not want to preach to anybody on it. We do think that for people that are interested in philanthropy, that they can learn from each other, but I happen to believe in. I don't believe in perpetual foundations myself, but plenty of people do, and there are a number that have worked out well, and God bless them. I mean, I've had the feeling that I'm not sure. I was out on Father's Day with my great-grandchildren, and when I look at my great-grandchildren, I'm sure they're all geniuses, but I'm not so sure that I can pick 40 years from now or 50 years from now that they will be the best custodians of dispensing of huge sums of money. So, as I mentioned to Randall in the past, I mean, I like to think I can think outside the box, but if that box is 6 feet underground, I want the money spent by people I've picked. I mean, I know some talented people, and I want to get the money out. But on the other hand, if somebody wants to have a perpetual foundation that goes on with their name forever, God bless them. I mean, it may turn out to be the greatest foundation that has come down the pike.
I think humility and empathy are probably related, and I think that explains a lot. Brad Keywell has a question.
So it was great to see you get involved with March Madness. I'm curious if you could talk about the $1 billion bracket.
Yeah, well, the $1 billion bracket was one of those easy-to-win contests that I decided to sponsor, where you got $1 billion, of course, if you could fill out the 63 winners of the games. And I had a call from a broker in Dallas. What had happened, it's kind of interesting. I was playing bridge with him early in August of last year, and he told me that he'd placed a policy for $10 million and received a premium of $400,000 that would only be payable if Bigfoot was found in Arkansas or Texas. And I said, well, why the hell didn't you call me? I mean, that's the easiest $400,000. I was really upset. I mean, I couldn't even see the cards. So anyway, he called me a few weeks later, and he said, well, I've got another one for you, and what would you charge to give $1 billion if the bracket is filled out completely right for the 63 games? And I said, well, can I pay $1 a year for 1 billion years? That was my first reaction. And he said, no, you gotta have to have $500 million of present value. So anyway, I gave him a quote. It didn't work out with them, but then I was with Dan Gilbert, who's a member of the Giving Pledge in Detroit, Quicken Loan, and I mentioned to him this possibility, and he jumped on it, so we had the contest. Now, we're gonna make it a little easy. Well, I'm just the insurer. I hope Quicken decides to do it again next year, and we'll make it easier next year.
How many people played this year?
Well, not as many millions as should have, because the entry form was too hard. We didn't ask him, Yahoo asked him to give the cell phone number, which was a big mistake. We're going to make it very easy next year.
You know it's good marketing when it's not that many millions engaged. So that's actually a perfect segue, because I was watching and I was very impressed with the engagement there, and I thought actually here we might borrow the concept. So Kathy, can you cue the music here? Maybe we'll we're gonna play. You like bets and you like playing, so. All right. Have you been working out?
No, I'll tell you,
that's what I call like storming Omaha Beach with the big guns.
I went one-on-one with LeBron a few years ago, and we had a jump ball, and LeBron went up. He got the tip, went the length of the court, dunked it, and just then turned around, and just then I was jumping. So that's
and we had a photographer there, so it's perfect. Yeah. So what we have is, this is not March Madness, this is June Madness. And the way you win is not by picking perfect 63 hoops winners, but it's by mastering Warren Buffett trivia. and maybe we'll get a few good stories out of you on the way. So
Everything about me is trivia.
So it's perfect. We have 16 tables, so we already have a Sweet 16. So I need every table. That's what those little cards, you're wondering what those little paddles on your table, in the middle of your table are for. I need 20 seconds. I need each table to appoint a captain of the table. So argue amongst yourselves. 15 seconds, not too long. We have problems to fix.
Well, this is a new one.
We're gonna have some fun. I'll ask you to elaborate on some of this. All right. Now, do we have our captains? Captain, my captain. All right, good. Captains. All right. Now it's not. Now, Warren, you like a good bet, and it's not a proper Warren Buffett June Madness without a prize. So, Don Pardo, what are we playing for?
Randall, we're playing for a full-page ad in Forbes magazine. Back to you, Randall.
Thank you, Don Pardo. And now we're playing for an ad for your charity or for your nonprofit. So imagine whatever board you're on, walking into the next board meeting and said, yep, $112,000 ad taken care of. So that's some stake. So unlike the $1 billion bracket, we have less money, but a sure thing.
A sure
thing.
winner.
So that's a Warren Buffett kind of odds. All right, so that's, all right, so table of Kevin's, get ready now. First of all, cell phones down. This is a charity event, philanthropy, no cheat. I don't want to give out a red card here to mix my sports metaphors.
I'm here for a photo friend.
We're going to be phony each time. All right, so let's, and I'm going to ask everyone to raise at the same time so you can't kind of cheat off your neighbors like you did in business school. All right, question one. You have A, B, and C, 3 choices. All right, how much of his wealth has Warren Buffett publicly promised to give away during his life or at his death? A, answer 50%. B, 95%. C, 99%. Discuss, and I will tell you, discuss, I'm going to give you 10 seconds, and then I'm going to ask you to raise the paddles together. And I'll get you to elaborate. Oh, don't raise it, don't help your fellow tables. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3, raise. 2, all right, clearly too easy. All right, they all got it. 99%.
Yeah. I feel like Vanna White up here.
How did you come up? Now, again, that is such a giving pledge, 50%, 99%. Where did that come from?
Well, it's going to be more than 99 because basically,
the answer is D, 99.8.
No, but
will it be more or less than 99.5? We'll have to go back to that.
The wealth is just growing, and the degree to which money has a utility to me hasn't grown. I mean, I have everything in the world I want. I had everything in the world I wanted 20 years ago. So all of the gain can't do anything for me. If I thought it could do anything for me, I'd spend it in a second. But so as the sum grows, and the part that has utility to me doesn't grow, obviously the percentage grows to charity.
All right, here's question 2. Again, put your pedals up when I say, because otherwise your friends are gonna piggyback on you. How did Warren and Bill come up with their hit list for the Giving Pledge? A, they employ private investigators, including Kroll and Associates. B, they take the Forbes 400 list and start calling top to bottom. C, Warren hired Edward Snowden to hack into the IRS files.
This is really a tough quiz.
10 seconds here. Yeah. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2. All right, put them up. Let's see. All right, I'm clearly, yeah. we've got to raise the degree of difficulty.
Okay,
all right, let's do it. We're going to raise the degree of difficulty. All right, the original slogan of the Giving Pledge was give big, give early, give smart. Now, Warren, you then insisted that the name be shortened to which of those 2 words? A, give big, B, give early, or C, give smart. This one maybe you discuss amongst yourselves here. So. All right, 5-second warning. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, raise your paddles. C, 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 A, C, C, A, Warren, what is the answer?
I don't know. You tell me. I didn't raise my paddle.
Keep them high, keep them high. I've been told by my spies in the Gates organization that it was A. It is A, give big. That is A, give big. We have one table here. We have one table back there. Hold on, lift it up. Lift it up. We have a table back there. It's A. Lift it up. All right. All right, we have 2 tables left. So let's keep on. We're going to keep playing. We already got to the finals. Well, how about that? All right. All right, how old, the rest of you can play at home. How old was Warren when he decided to give away, that he would give away most of his money rather than leave it to his children? Was he in his mid-20s, mid-50s, or mid-70s? High stakes here, folks.
I'm glad you didn't say mid-90s.
All right. The rest of you can, all right, so do we have an answer in the back, and do we have an answer here in the front? The front, they are saying, I have the answer in the front. In the back, what do you got? Mid-20s, mid-50s, or mid-70s? You guys, B, mid-50s. A, mid-20s. Answer is, Warren?
Mid-20s, and it was a joint decision with my wife.
How did you now? It's pretty amazing. We will settle up in a second. It is pretty amazing if you think about where you are and what, just the success you've had. I mean, why were you even thinking about that in your mid-20s?
Well, I had told my wife that I was going to be rich. She never believed it. But if you take mid-20s, that's actually when I was back here in New York City, no, I knew that we would have a lot of money, and I knew we would do everything that money would do for us.
But you were a young father then, again. So
I had 3 kids.
So that's the time when you usually are thinking, it's all about my kid, and yet you were thinking long term. I don't think I want to leave everything.
Our view then was what wasn't articulated then, because actually Kay Graham gave me the line later on. But basically, we felt like if we got to be very wealthy, that our kids should be able to do anything but not enough, give them enough to do anything but not enough to do nothing. And we wanted to raise our kids in a normal manner. They all went to public school. They rode the buses. They didn't get cars at 16 or anything of the sort. But they also, we also did go to Disneyland and do different things like that. So they were raised in a very normal manner. They've felt very lucky, the fact that they've never had to worry about money, but they've never felt that they could sit on their rear ends and do nothing. And now they're all active in philanthropy, and they like that a lot. And they feel they're among the lucky, 7 billion people in the world, they're in the luckiest 100th of 1% or something like that, and they don't feel that for some reason they're entitled to be in the lucky 10,000 and 1/10,000th to 1%.
Where did the idea come to endow them each with their own foundation? I mean, that's something that a little unusual.
Originally, when my wife and I talked about it in the 20s, and we actually incorporated the foundation when she was 31, I was 33. It's going to have its 50th anniversary right now. The idea always originally was that I would pile it up and then she would unpile it. And we both thought we were good at those 2 different tasks. And she would run this one large foundation. And perhaps my children would be involved in it if they were interested, but she would be number 1 on it. And 20 years or so ago, I was talking to Larry Tisch, who some of you may know or may have known, and he said that that's fine, but putting 3 kids on a foundation, one of them may have gone to this school, one of them may have gone to that school, one may be interested in this because their child has a given illness or something, and it's a recipe for perhaps creating family discord. And if there's one thing that if you got a lot of money, the last thing in the world you should do is use your money in a way that's going to screw up your family. So we talked about it, and I came back and set up a separate foundation for each one of the 3 children, which originally was very small, only $100,000 as I remember. and told them that do with it what you wish with philanthropy. I'm not going to be on the board. You don't have to tell me. You don't have to get my okay. I'm going to give you all more money later on, but it'll be done equally because I'm not going to try and judge one of you versus the other. For one reason, I don't know how to judge in philanthropy necessarily who's doing the best job. So just go out and follow your passions on it and take whatever you're interested in and pursue it, and you don't have to, get the vote of the other two like you might if you were running a big foundation. Well, the consequence of that was terrific. The kids worked better together because they didn't have to work together. So if my daughter came up with a good idea on education, one of her brothers might pick it up, both of her brothers might pick it up because they didn't have to. And so they cooperated constantly. They still do. Now they're going to be giving away about maybe 130 or 40 million annually, and they're still working together, and they're in their 50s now. So the last thing in the world you want to do is have a foundation where you've got multiple members of the family on, and they start arguing about my idea is better than your idea. It can be poison. I visited one foundation, one of the largest, and the son was on it. Several sisters were on it. One sister was chairman. It was totally dysfunctional. The MacArthur Foundation was dysfunctional originally. You really want something that brings out the best in people.
It's very comforting. The genius makers were...
Well, actually, you'll get a kick out of this. I got a call 20 years ago or so. I was out in Laguna. The phone rings. I pick up the phone, and I think the fellow's name was Jack Sawyer. He says, "This is Jack Sawyer." He says, "I'm chairman of the MacArthur Foundation." And he says, "The first thing I want to tell you is you haven't won anything." I was not on the list for the Genius Award. But he said, our foundation is totally dysfunctional. I mean, we've got a lawyer standing behind every trustee, and they can't get along, and you're the one guy that we think might come in and bring some sense to it, and we'd appreciate it if you would. And the Ed Jonas Salk called me, and Jerry Wiesner up at MIT and everything. You just hate to see it become a mess, and you really hate to see it become a mess if your family's involved. It shouldn't be that way, and it doesn't have to be that way. And I would say one way to prevent it from being that way, particularly, is to make sure that if you have a large foundation, you still have something for each one individually where they don't have to get the approval of somebody else, and they don't start trading off things, or old sore points don't come to the fore or anything of that sort. All I can tell you is it's worked very well in the family.
Well, we have to go and go do some good work here. I want to note two things. One, I'm surprised I have to tell this room this, but if we can learn anything from Warren Buffett, it's don't follow the herd. So think about 14 out of 16 tables getting out on the same question. So, contrarianism will generally set you free, but congratulations to this table over here. Second thing is, I do want to thank you on behalf of everybody at Forbes. I mean, you are, I told you yesterday, you are the godfather of this event. Without your encouragement, none of us would be here. So, I'd like to end with one final quiz. I mean, when they ask people, probably not you and me, but when they ask people 100 years from now, who was Warren Buffett, I think the answers will be, you'll have a choice of A, the greatest investor of the 20th century, or B, the greatest philanthropist of the 21st century. And I think the answer is C, all the above. So I very much from the heart want to thank you for being here.
I want to thank Forbes for what they've done. I mean, it's just terrific that you brought all these people together. I mean, in this cause, the payoff is going to be terrific.
Thank you. Well, thank you. And again, thank you, Warren. It's a pleasure having you every year here. We have a great American.